Yes!
We're on our way into Destiny 2's 4th year, and as this franchise grows older, there'll always be new players joining the community. Back in 2019, Destiny 2 New Light launched, making Destiny 2 free to play and gave players access to the base game and the first 2 expansions for free. But here in 2020, Destiny 2 is available on Xbox Game Pass, and due to how popular Game Pass has become, I expect a huge influx of new players joining the Destiny 2 community now. But with all of these new players coming out of the woodwork, it's safe to say that none of them will be familiar with any of the occurrences that partook in year 1 of Destiny 2 because they weren't there. I'm specifically referring to the factions, which were retired altogether back in year 1 and never saw the light of day beyond that. And in this video, we're going to discuss what the factions are and or were, as well as the possibility of them returning. So yeah, let's go ahead and get it in. First off, you might be asking, what are the factions anyways? Allow me to go ahead and state that from this point on, I'm referring to the factions in D1. I'll let you know when I'm talking about Destiny 2's factions to avoid confusion. Okay, so back in Destiny 1, there were 3 NPCs present in the tower social space, and aside from being leaders of 3 different organizations, they were also vendors that gave themed legendary weapons and armor. Present in the northern part of the tower was Executor Hideo, leader of New Monarchy. New Monarchy is a staunchly pro-city faction that believes in law and order. They hope to rebuild the Golden Age and believe in humanity's ability to overcome their current hardships. While the faction wars may have ended with the establishment of the consensus, New Monarchy still aims to place an enlightened monarchy in charge of the city in place of the currently fragile alliances between factions. Their colors are red and white. In the tower's hangar existed both Arak Jalal, leader of Dead Orbit, and Lakshmi II, leader of Future War Code. Members of Dead Orbit and its Araks follow a grim, fatalistic, even nihilistic code where the only hope for civilization is to leave Earth and find a new home. Such beliefs are recorded in a tome called the Book of Departure. Their colors were black, white, and gray. Members of the cult are known for their military prowess as well as their secrecy. They believe that war with the darkness is inevitable, whether they stay on Earth or attempt to flee, and therefore they must be ready to fight. They are also deeply concerned with fate and whether or not it's possible to alter history altogether. The cult is led by a group called the Inner Circle, and their colors are purple, white, and yellow, and a bunch of other random colors, but purple, white, and yellow were the main ones. In order to pledge your allegiance to a faction, you had to obtain a faction badge from one of the faction leaders and wouldn't be able to switch factions until the following reset day. But it was possible and most highly recommended to pledge to one faction per Guardian, which is exactly what I will always do. While pledged to a faction, completing in-game activities such as strikes or crucible matches will accumulate points towards leveling that particular faction, and every time you leveled up, you will be rewarded with weapons, armor, and vanity items via rank up packages. With legendary marks, you could directly purchase weapons and armor from the faction vendors, and the perks and or rolls of all the gear will randomize every week. This was an amazing feature because it gave everybody something to look forward to every week. Another amazing bonus that D1 had that D2 still doesn't have is the exotic class items, which will be rewarded to you after completing a long and grindy quest. All of these exotic class items had a perk known as the Life Exotic, which enabled it to be used at the same time as another exotic armor piece. And aside from this perk and providing some unique spawning effects, these exotic class items didn't really do anything else special. And if I recall correctly, via these exotic class items was the only way that you could get alternative spawning effects back in Destiny 1. Sometime later, and I have no idea why Bungie decided to do this, but legendary rarity versions of these exotic class items were added to the loot pool of each faction. Cosmetically, the legendary and exotic versions of the class items were exactly the same, but from what I remember, the legendary ones didn't provide the unique spawning effects that the exotic ones did. This was a huge slap in the face to everybody who grinded their literal souls away to obtain these exotic class items, me being one of them, because I was able to get all 3 of them on my Warlock and Titan, but I only had enough remaining willpower to go for the Dead Orbit Cloak on my Hunter. But yeah, aside from that, factions were amazing because they offer another method to obtain weapons and armor, and when a new player decided to start playing D1, telling them to join a faction was the first thing that I will always have them do. But in Destiny 2, factions functioned so differently to the point where things couldn't even be considered the same. In year 1, you could pledge to one faction per Guardian, but the only time you would be able to receive gear from each faction was during an event called the Faction Rally. The Faction Rally was an event that tasked everybody to complete in-game activities in order to accumulate as many faction tokens to rank up your faction of choice. Each faction would have a featured weapon that could be purchased for 1,000 glimmer if they won the rally. If your faction did not win the rally, you could still purchase the featured weapon, but it would cost 50,000 glimmer instead. Now you could easily get around this by pledging to one faction per Guardian like I stated earlier, and every time the faction rally came around, there will always be a new featured weapon per faction. In my opinion, this was very anticlimactic because all of this partook during the double primary era, and back then all weapons had one single trait perk instead of 2 like we have right now, and all weapon rolls were static, which means that random rolls weren't a thing back then. This means that if you had a weapon with, let's say, hammerforged rifling, extended barrel, snapshot sights, that's all it would ever be able to drop with. Again, snapshot sights is a trait perk, so that would be the only trait perk that weapon would have. So if you enjoy your, I guess we could say, opening shot and rangefinder hand cannon that you use in PvP all the time, it would have only been able to roll with opening shot or rangefinder. Literally just one of those, if it existed in year 1 of D2. If the history of the factions is news to you, then the double primary era definitely is as well. And if you want to know what the double primary era was, I have a link in the description box of this video. I uploaded a very detailed video about this, so I highly suggest that you check it out. But back to it. I never cared about the featured weapons because the static rolls and single trait perks made them very lackluster, so I never really felt the need to go for them, and before long my interest in the faction rallies dwindled. But sometime later in year 1, the faction rallies changed and only allow one faction allegiance per account per rally, and due to the fact that the faction rallies happen roughly once a month, this change forced everybody to be 100% certain about their decision. However, despite the lackluster state of year 1 being played with double primary weapon loadouts, static weapon rolls, and poor loot incentives, Bungie did their possible best to spice things up by introducing faction-themed armor ornaments and vanity items, as well as an actual ranking system for the factions, with some pretty nice rewards if I'm being honest. At rank 30, each faction will reward you with a weapon catalyst, and at rank 50, you would get an exotic armor ornament. Now when it comes to the catalyst, it was the Sweet Business catalyst from New Monarchy, the Sunshot catalyst from Future War Cult, and the Graviton Lance catalyst from Dead Orbit. And for the exotic armor ornaments, it was the Blazing Earth for the Titan's Cresta Alpha Lupi from New Monarchy, the Predestination ornament for the Hunter's Knucklehead Radar from Future War Cult, and the Gaze Beyond Worlds ornament for the Warlock's Eye of Another World. Getting to rank 30 in the factions was an absolute slog, especially for me, a person who enjoyed not a single thing about Destiny 2 back in year 1, so I managed to hit rank 50 with Future War Cult and never felt the need to do it again with another faction, and I only picked FWC because Sunshot was one of my favorite weapons back in year 1. I don't feel as bad about this roughly 2 to 3 years later because Bungie made the catalyst for Sweet Business, Graviton Lance, and Sunshot available as random drops from completing Crucible matches, if I'm not mistaken. Now, it's been a while since I've obtained these catalysts, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, if I recall correctly, Dead Orbit won the very first faction rally, then New Monarchy won like 3 or 4 times in a row, which is still an insane realization a few years later, then Future War Cult ended up winning once. In present day Destiny 2 being the tail end of year 3, the factions, faction rallies, and almost every trace of them doesn't exist in the game anymore, aside from the NPC faction leaders remaining in the tower, and most of, if not all, the faction themed armor and weapons finding their way into the general loot pool. So if you're wondering why weapons such as Dire Promise and Interference 4 have logos on them, bringing the factions back in some way, shape, or form has been one of the most requested things by the Destiny community, but it seems like Bungie has zero interest in doing so. Trials of the Nine was retired after season 3, and Trials of Osiris didn't make its Destiny 2 debut until season 10, so a part of me feels that there's still some likelihood that the factions will end up returning. Maybe one day, we'll see. But yeah, everybody, that does it for this one. If you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed what you watched, do me a favor and thumb the rest of that like button until it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.